Thank you. I apologize for looking a bit ghoulish, but I am actually in a hotel room in California with my husband asleep in the background. So my apologies. But we're looking forward to a team presentation here this morning. Really, hopefully inciting everyone on the call to dig in and help fill the knowledge gaps in OI, which are so huge. Ingunn's going to run the slides, and I'll take the next slide, Ingunn. So I'm a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. I've been in the same place for a long, long time, and I've had the extraordinary opportunity to see the outcomes of my patients improve extraordinarily because we have wonderful things, bisphosphonates, rotting, etc. But what that's also shown me is that the natural history of OI is changing very, very rapidly. And OI professionals don't have answers to almost all of your questions. And I think that's come up over and over again today. Tracy is going to address the really important role of patient advocacy organizations. And then Ingunn's going to come in and talk about some of the things that her group is doing. Next slide. So as I mentioned a moment ago, when I first started out, the rotting we had was very primitive and it was hard to get. That has been radically changed. We have the bisphosphonates. And of course, we've been made more aware of pulmonary concerns, particularly. The OI Foundation, which is what I know best, has made huge efforts to try to capture that change and help predict the future. I led something called the Adult Natural History Study. We have a longitudinal study funded by the federal government. We have a contact registry, and very specifically now focusing on pulmonary, we have the Jamie Kendall Research Fund. Next slide. But what we're working on hard is a strategy that will help us capture this rapidly changing story, not just for today, but for the long term for our patients. Because as Qasim pointed out, the life expectancy in OI may not quite be average, but it's not bad. And we want that quality of life to be excellent. Next slide. But boy, do we have a knowledge gap. And it's all over the place. Clearly, the parents want to know what are the best treatments. Finally, men are stepping up and demanding more knowledge about treatments for them. And for women, why do we know so little about what's best for them? Next slide. Now, one has to be practical about trying to acquire all this different information. The natural history studies are extraordinary. And we have something in the United States called the Brittle Bone Disease Consortium, and it is phenomenal. And we get to see the patients at least once a year. We have extraordinary data. The problem is it's incredibly costly and we are very vulnerable. Will we get renewed? Now, luckily we get our funding in 5-year increments, but still, how long will we get to do this? It's very unlikely that we will go more than 15 years, and that isn't going to answer a lot of the questions that are out there. So I'm big on natural history studies. I am a local PI, but I know about the vulnerability it entails. Next slide. Registries of all different sorts are a new opportunity, and certainly not really new, because they are incredibly cheap to run. The data is self-reported, and your ultra keen scientists might say, well, you can't really trust the data. Well, it's the best data out there. And if people are willing to step up and put in their own information, there's a tremendous amount to glean. At the end of this, we're going to talk a little bit about our problems recruiting. But we have a OI registry. The Rudy study is out there. And of course, there's far more going on. Next slide. Ingunn, in just a minute, is going to talk to you about the newest effort out there, the Impact Survey, which is a joint effort of the OI Foundation, OIFE, and Moreo. And this will very specifically target learning about the impact OI has on people and national health systems. And now I will turn it over to Tracy.
Thank you, Dr. Tosi. I'm just going to add my 2 cents, but I did want to thank Patricia and Elaine, and of course, Drs. Bishop and Javid for having us. And I'm just going to quickly talk about what the role of the patient advocacy organization is from my perspective. So next slide. So those who know me, I'm a big believer in partnerships. It's all about the partnership. And I don't even really need to talk to this slide because it is beautifully modeled here today. The partnership that the Brittle Bone Society has with your physicians and your experts. I mean, it's just evident that that's, modeled beautifully here. But I do think that is super important. And I think that's where the patient advocacy organization can be very helpful, because we have access to many of those physicians so that we can put people together to form those partnerships. And then we can identify those knowledge gaps together, which is really important. I know Dr. Healy just talked about somebody just talked about the patient voice. I apologize. That is so important, especially to the OI Foundation, because we are working hard on something called the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Initiative. So I know Dr. Tosi will talk a little bit about that. And then, we can use our communication channels that we have to form those partnerships and to bring people together through meetings and all these virtual meetings that we're doing. So again, super important. And I don't have to say any more about that because you're doing it so well. Next slide. I think identifying the needs of the community is where the patient advocacy organization can be really helpful as well. And especially when we're asking for data, because we need to make sure that people know why. Why are we asking for this data? That's been one of the issues that we've quite honestly had in the US is we ask people for a lot of information and then we don't give them information back on what we've been doing. So we've been working really hard to make sure that once we ask you for information or data, that we tell you why and what the results of the studies were or the surveys or whatever. So we want to make sure that's a partnership as well. We can, help educate the community about data collection activities. I mean, data, that's just it just is boring to the sound of it, but it's so important. It's your stories, it's your information, and that we need that information. And then, as the patient advocacy organization, we can raise the money needed to support things like registries and natural history studies. That's where we can be very valuable as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Ingunn now.
Thank you, Tracy. And I would also like to thank for the invitation. I'm going to talk about the impact survey, which probably a lot of you have heard about already. Thank you to the BBS for promoting it. Another tool for the organizations is surveys next to registries and databases and natural history studies. But I would like to stress that I feel that the impact is more than just another surveys, because we know you hate surveys and we know you've been exposed to quite a lot of them recently. The impact is a global research project of high scientific quality and value with central OI professionals from US, Canada, and Europe involved. The lack of data is one of the biggest challenges in rare diseases. So impact is our way of dealing with lack of big data in OI. The data will be used to enable better diagnosis, treatment, and care, and to support availability of potential future treatments for OI. So we will use it both to develop good clinical advice to make it easier for Dr. Tosi and her colleagues to advise, but also when it comes to convincing authorities to pay for better services, better mobility aids, better treatments. It's also an opportunity to provide documentation from the perspective of people with OI and OI parents. As they say, nothing about us without us. So the survey is asking questions that has not been covered in any survey as far as I know before, at least not globally. We ask about treatment of adults. What kind of treatments are adults with OI using in different countries? How long are they using them? Do they have positive effects? Do people have questions about them? This is data that is available for children to a certain extent, but we're really missing data about treatments in adults. We are also asking questions about worries. What kind of worries do people with OI or parents of children have? Are they worried about getting older, losing their independence, romantic relationships, sexuality? These are also questions that hasn't really been addressed before in these kind of surveys. Third main topic is costs in OI. Do you have to pay for your treatment? Of course, this will vary from country to country. Do you have to pay for your wheelchair, maybe your second wheelchair, the dentist, or other kinds of adaptations? This is very different from country to country. And with the impact survey, we will have much better data to use in our organization's advocacy work to persuade the government and other institutions to pay for these kind of adaptations that all people with OI need, but only a few have access to. So what I want you to do, we have now around 120 responses from the UK, which is good, but we would really like more than that. So our goal is 2,000 on a global basis, and we need your help to reach that goal. So if you are a person with OI or a parent of a child with OI, take the survey yourself if you haven't done so already. You can save and continue the next day if you need more time or if you need to think about something. And please do not only take the survey yourself, but many of you have a lot of family members with OI. Tell them about this. Tell them it's important to fill in this survey, and tell your friends with OI that you might think is a bit not so keen on surveys, and tell men with OI, because we only have 25% response rate from men at the moment, and we need more information to answer the questions from men with OI. And if you don't answer, I will torture you on chat, as I have already started with on Facebook, and I'm sure I will lose some Facebook friends in this process, but I feel it's worth it because it's one of the most important projects the OIFE has had so far, and I'm very happy that we can collaborate with the OI Foundation, and not only the OI Foundation, but actually all the OI organizations in the world are doing a major effort to get as many responses as we can. So this is a unique opportunity to fill the knowledge gaps that we have in OI today. And then I give it back to Dr. Tosi.
Thanks, Ingunn. Great. So I think the way we hope that this audience will look at it is not today, tomorrow, but what do things look like for the next 50 years? We need people to recognize that there aren't going to be immediate answers about a lot of things, but it's just like your retirement plan. You have to invest. It's going to build up slowly, but the payoff will be huge. Next slide. We have to be realistic. And as we've looked very hard at making our registry in the US successful, we've been fascinated really about some of the problems. Turns out the term registry is a roadblock. People don't want to feel that they're being chalked up on some terrible list. Should we call it a database? Could we simply call it a research consortium? We're working hard to figure out a name for our registry that won't turn people off. What problems should be prioritized? We recognize that people won't spend a whole lot of time doing a single survey. So we have to put things out there in small increments. And clearly, this is where patient input is absolutely critical. There's no question my patients, caregivers would prefer that I do the data entry. Well, I assure you, I have no money for that. And it is essential that patients step up and talk about themselves, caregivers talk about their children. This has to be a group effort and everybody has to dig in. We've also heard people talk a lot about, well, I'm worried about my data, who's going to get access to it? And that's very real to be concerned about in these days of all kinds of data misbehavior. But all the databases I know of in the US, and I assume in Europe as well, are through academic institutions or very highly regulated processes. And therefore, I feel much safer about my research data than I do about my checking account or my credit card. So no, we can't promise you total data protection, but I would argue that every researcher I know is working monumentally hard to keep the data safe. Finally, I'm always so interested in the question, can I trust what my doctor's telling me? Can I get the best quality of care? Well, I don't know, but what I can tell you is if we can't improve the quality of the data that we have, you can't trust what you're getting. We have got to work harder. We've got to be able to give you better information. So, next slide. What is my long-term pie in the sky goal? That we develop a lasting collaboration with the entire OI community that leads to better, up-to-date information, which will help to make important medical decisions across the entire lifespan. Next slide. So every voice matters. People with OI, parents, family members, caregivers, and of course, clinicians and researchers, all have to help in this effort. And I hope everyone will sign up for Ingunn's survey. And clearly I'm reaching out all the time for folks to be an ROI registry. Rudy, it would be grand if there were more patients. Please help us. Next slide. So thank you so much for inviting us. We've had a great amount of fun putting this together for you, but I really think this is the future and it's going to help us understand what are the most important issues for the OI community and move forward to answer them. Thank you.